Our next panel is titled Building Bridges or Walls, a U.S. immigration update from D.C., talking about Trump's America again and coming back to many of the issues that we've been focusing on, but now get to spend some extra time getting all of the latest political updates from Anindita and her panel. Anindita will lead the discussion. She's managing attorney at USI Law, and if you were here yesterday, you can understand that she is super passionate about immigration and very knowledgeable and brings a wealth of experience to the table, especially in the area of compliance and keeping up on these changes that are happening in our current system. So Anindita, if you would come up, that would be great. Next, we've got Rohit Turkhud, who's a partner with Fakuri Law Group. He brings 32 years of experience in immigration as an attorney, and also has a breadth of experience that covers more than just employment immigration, but also investor immigration and other areas that pertain to the deportation and more complex aspects that isn't often a topic of discussion in these conferences. He's also written an article as part of the new PERM book that will be discussed later today, so he has a lot of knowledge in the PERM and the permanent residence process that we'll talk about. Next, Ravishankar Sathyanarayana. Say it again. Excellent. Thank you for your help. He's head of international mobility at LTI, and he comes with 21 years of experience as a global immigration and mobility leader. He's also worked at ACIS, Infosys, Scope International, HCL. He's come with a long line of experience, and we welcome you to our panel. And then Praveen, Hebbale, you've been introduced, and we are very grateful for your presence on these panels. Thank you, and I'll leave it to Anindita.
Welcome, everybody. We have the privilege, or so I think, of having the most dynamic, most disputed, most anxiously awaited discussion, at least for today. And I'm honored to be joined with my colleagues that already have been introduced by Jake. The way we've structured it is there are certain laws that I would like to cover because I know you know about it, you read about it, you're concerned about it, you might be traumatized by it. So I want to go through the legislation that this great president has attempted in the last 7 months. And then I think what would be really helpful for all of us is an interactive discussion. So definitely get ready with your slide of questions. So let me just quickly address all the Trump's legislation that he's trying or attempting to implement. The immigration plan this president has as an agenda is to reduce illegal immigration, which might be a good thing, build a wall on the southern border, which I'm sure each one of you have heard a lot about, deport 11 million undocumented workers, which I guess, if you agree with me, Rohit, it's more like 15. End birthright citizenship for children born to foreigners in the US. For those of you who don't know, if you're born on US soil, whether you're a non-immigrant visa holder or a green card holder or a citizen or illegal, you get the privilege of a US citizenship. Reduce legal immigration, which is a concern all of us have. Reduce the number of immigrant visas. Restrict the ways and means of work visas, which is a direct impact to everybody here. Make legal immigration more difficult through administrative measures. The first thing that he's attempted to do, as we all know, is a travel ban to the 7 Muslim countries. It speaks for itself. I have a problem even reading his words out to you, but just to entertain ourselves, he states, our country's immigration policies should be designed and implemented to serve, first and foremost, the US national interest, Visa programs for foreign workers should be administered in a manner that protects the civil rights of American workers and current lawful residents, and that prioritizes the protection of American workers, our forgotten people, and the jobs they hold. Additionally, the legislation on Capitol Hill, I just want to attend to these real quick. I'm sure you've heard of most of this, if not all of this. Chuck Grassley, a Republican from Iowa, and Dick Durbin, a Democrat from Illinois, have introduced legislation that would attempt to reform the manner in which H&L visas are granted. Mind you, these are all, the next few slides will discuss legislation that has been introduced. The distinct difference is that these are not laws and are not implemented yet. What would be the future of each of these proposed legislation is something we'd like to also discuss with you in a few minutes. So this particular legislation attempts to ban all H-dependent companies from filing additional H-1 visas, which is, I hope you agree with, the most ridiculous thing we've heard. A preference-based allocation of work visas beginning with students, preference given to those who have received advanced degrees from US universities. The next is Zoe Lofgren, a Democrat congressman from California, who we know infamously proposed H-1B salaries to begin at $130,000. This is an almost unimaginable amount of money, no matter, what your level, at least on a systems analyst chart is. Of course, the great president is obsessed with his Buy American, Hire American concept, and to that effect, he wants to overhaul the H visas as we know it and reserve it for the most skilled and the highest paid applicants, who, of course, are not used to replace Americans. The RAISE Act is something we should be concerned about because there is Tom Cotton, a Republican from Arkansas, and David Perdue, a Republican from Georgia, who's come up with creating a merit-based system. So what are they proposing? Again, it's a proposal. Creating a merit-based system. We're very familiar with this to a certain extent. Countries like Canada and Australia already have it, as we've discussed in several of our panels already. So creating a merit-based system, immigration system, that favors English speakers and high-skilled workers, that should work well for us. Reducing overall immigration to the US by 50% from current levels. Limiting family-based immigration to immediately just nuclear family. For those of you who might not know, right now family-based immigration covers if you have parents who are US citizens, they can sponsor children, spouses can sponsor their spouse, children over 21 can sponsor their parents, brothers and sisters. So he wants to limit it just to nuclear families. He also wants to reduce refugee admissions, we know that for a fact, and eliminate the diversity lottery program. To touch upon his several administrative actions that he has attempted to introduce or has enacted, the computer programmer position memo that was snuck in on March 31st, the very hours before we could actually drop off all the H petitions to whichever courier we use, limits or black marks the use of the computer programmer position for level 1 salary. We will get into this in our discussion because we know that most of us, if not all of us, who filed H's and who have these positions have gotten RFEs that specifically target the level 1 salary. And we will engage in a discussion. It is a new field. Most attorneys, if not all attorneys, are still feeling their way around. Some of us have submitted responses to RFEs. We're waiting to see what the outcome is. So that's one issue that we will discuss shortly. 485 interviews for refugees and all employment-based petitions. For approximately, as I can remember, 12 to 13 years, employment-based petitions, which are who we had talked about PERMs extensively yesterday. We talked about EB1Cs, which are L1As, outstanding researchers, those kinds of categories, extraordinary ability researchers. None of the employment-based categories needed an interview. The purpose of an interview, for the way Mr. Trump wants to present it, is, oh, we want to get all the criminals. Well, the criminal background check, as all of you know, as we talked about yesterday also, is the fingerprinting that the FBI does on every application, right down to a kid. So if there was any criminals in the system, they would have gotten caught by now, at least from the employment-based sector. By adding 485 interviews to employment-based sectors, we can only imagine how much of a backlog that'll create in the process for a foreign national or an employee to eventually get his or her green card. We know about the deferred action. He has mandated Congress to make a decision in 6 months. So DACA, as we popularly know, who are children of illegal parents who've entered the US through no fault of their own, but just accompanying their parents and being a part of the family, President Obama had mandated that they would get special privileges such as a work card and be allowed to remain in the US. President Trump obviously has reversed that decision and now has threatened Congress to make a decision, or else they have to be thrown out. We know this for a fact. Site visits have increased. We've discussed this at length yesterday, so I just want to gloss over this. Now the site visits, not just for H's, also include L's. So again, we have to be careful of how we document stuff, whether we're going to remain compliant to L rules. L's, as you will know, L1As are managers, L1Bs are specialized knowledge. So we have to document the fact that the people that you're bringing for the appropriate visas actually do what we claim they do on the petitions that we prepare and submit. So kindly be careful about that. And the whole focus that he has is this whole enforcement perspective that he wants everybody to be compliant, and the big thing is, oh, you have to make a good faith effort of recruiting Americans first. The level 1 wages, I just want to touch upon it real quick, is that and we will discuss it in detail, the understanding is, the thought process that this has brought about is the fact that you're underpaying and overworking an employee if he happens or she happens to be a computer programmer and is at level 1. This, we foresee, will increase to other level 1, may increase to other level 1 positions. But I can confidently tell you that if you have a business logic of why you are paying your employee an X amount, because you've done the research, HR has structured the job duties coupled with the background, which includes the education and the professional experience for this candidate, you will have ground to stand on. Once again, as I mentioned, this is something very new to us. We are in the process of discovering what is acceptable for the USCIS, and I can tell you from experience, the best argument you have is a very solid argument based on the job description that the professional has, and matching it up with the professional's experience in education. We have seen actually level 2 positions also being questioned. So for those who are wondering what level 1 and level 2 is, let me quickly sum it up in 15 seconds. When we talked about the FLDC and the prevailing wage for the LCA yesterday, there are 4 levels to every position that's coded in the DOT. So that's level 1 and level 2. Level 1 is obviously the entry level, level 2, level 3, level 4 increases with experience. I want to quickly touch upon the State Department directives that you might have read. I read it on my flight over to Bangalore 2 days ago, which basically means, it is being publicized in the Times of India, at least where I read it. So for those of us who've been in the industry long enough, we know this is nothing that surprises us. There is an indicia of misrepresentation, meaning what? You're expected, when you come in a non-immigrant visa, with the exception of an H&L, which is a dual intent, any other non-immigrant visa other than an H&L requires you to come for the particular purpose that you're meant to be complying with, and then return back to your home country. So the B1, B2. B1 we know is visitors for business, B2 is tourists. Then there are A's for diplomats and C's for crews, D's, E's, F's, G's, I could go down the alphabet pool. But the issue here is that do not misuse the intent of the visa. If you do that, you will be considered to be, a fraudulent application, and they will enforce actions against you. That's what I want to quickly mention real quick before we move on. Know your rights. Especially after the travel ban, we saw an upswing in cases of even US citizens who were trying to re-enter, who might have been Muslim, who might have been brown, who might have been black in color, whatever the issues are, being forced to sign 407s or 275s, which are basically abandonment of, permanent resident statuses. Citizens were being, put in secondary searches. So be careful of advising your employees, or if it is you in person, not to sign any documents before, for one, requesting the assistance of an attorney, or putting up the good fight to say, a justification of why is this even being, presented in front of me to sign. Know your rights, essentially. Real quick, we touched upon this a little bit yesterday also. As companies, please make sure your DNB, your Dun & Bradstreet stats are updated, because the VIVE is a process through which the government, the USCIS, goes through to basically get data on you. Make sure there's no discrepancy, and make sure all the relevant paperwork, such as I-9, LCAs, everything is perfect and up to date. Overall, I want to just mention in conclusion the legislative landscape. We know that there is some changes that we might foresee. It's not going to be no changes at all. I don't think it'll be business as usual. We all know that. We all expected that. In fact, the election results were announced, I think, 2 days before our Zoom conference started last year. So, that was a whole different era, and now we've survived, I guess, 9 months from there. So be careful about how you prepare your documentation to protect the company that you work for. So we anticipate there might be some traction in some of these bills, but fortunately, Congress has proven to be rather dysfunctional. The president's relationship with the rest of the country, other than his base, has proven to be rather dysfunctional. And I think in chaos, we can benefit from that, hopefully. I would like to now open up our discussions to my panel, as I mentioned in the beginning. Could we have the Slido questions, please? Does the US have a workforce big enough talent pool of engineers and computer science holders to replace the positions that India's are currently holding? Where are the questions that he gave? That's a no-brainer, but who would like to even try to attempt to answer that question? It could be a very simple yes and no question.
Sure, okay. Can you guys hear at the back?
Okay.
Yeah, great. Anindita, you've provided so much great information and so much information to talk about that I'm not quite sure where to begin. Obviously, I think 45 minutes is not enough, so maybe INSZoom will consider that in next time. Do they have a pool? Just my thought on it. Obviously, if they did have a pool of qualified engineers, I don't think we'd be doing as many H1s and L1s as we do. So I think that fact alone speaks for itself. And then I'll let the other panelists also join in, but I have my own thoughts on what happens if the H and the L rules really come into play.
Rohit, I just wanted to add on that. So while we agree that it is not, and hence we are doing so many more, but the point what we cannot forget is that it is still created the impact or the confusion in the state of mind of being at the business side or the management side or at the global mobility or immigration side. We are also kind of thinking whether what number would be the right number and what would be the mix. And I'm sure all of us has went through in terms of this time what should be my number and depending upon the outcome to do. And now I think, we believe that the situation would improve. Even in the coming year, it is still the same question is there in our mind. Should I do the same number last year? Should I do the number that I did it 3 years ago? Or should I go by business requirement? It's an open question that all of us are taking a chance and trying to see what we can do our best.
Before we get on to the very obvious Slido question and the totally unambiguous answer, last bit, are there enough skilled people in the US? I'll fall back on statistics. I think yesterday we saw when James Wolf presented the unemployment in the tech sector is about 3%. which I think is almost unhealthy level. So to me, that means they'll need people on work permits, visas to come in from outside, and that's where I would lay it for now.
If I can just add one comment. When people ask me, because, now the papers are all over, and it's not even IT, it's come down to Indians are taking our jobs. My only comeback to that is, I said, could you please logically explain why any petitioning company will have to pay anywhere between $24.60 or $64.60 if they really didn't need that person? I'm not even counting legal fees.
I'm seeing that Slido change, and it's kind of interesting.
What? We have 41%?
And of course,
Okay,
Anindita
do you
forgot to
think
count me
President
in
Trump
there.
will last his full term?
So my thought on this, to Anindita's disappointment, I think he will last his full term. I think he's possibly doing things that may be questionable, that may even be sometimes classified as stupid. I really don't believe he's doing anything illegal that's going to get him booted out. But that's just my thought. And then I had a bit of a discussion on this last night, and she had sworn dire consequences if I disagreed with her, but hopefully she won't do that in public.
No, Rohit said just to make this session exciting, he will contradict me in my very vocal opinions of Trump. And I assured him that he might have a shoe thrown at him. So if he's risking that, that's okay.
I'll just chime in. I think there are two things that could swing it, Russia and North Korea. He's under investigation. We'll wait out to see what come out of the Russian probe. That could decide whether he stays on or not, and are there grounds for impeachment if things come out that way. And the second, North Korea, I think that could swing both ways. If he does something stupid, he's surely likely to get booted out. But if he does something which is seen as heroic, he may just last through the term.
Absolutely.
I would wait out on that.
Just one quick thought on that. I think traditionally we've seen that if the U.S. is at war with another country, the president will
He's
get
sympathetic.
Yeah, there will be a sympathy vote, or there will be there won't be an inclination to take a risk on somebody brand new. So I think he may last a second term as well, Anindita.
Much to Anindita's
Let's
disappointment.
not go there. Will the wall on the Mexican border be built?
Just to clarify here, it's not about the physical wall we are talking about, whether it is a southern border here, there, but we want to prompt the discussion to see whether is he really going to impede immigration. So that's the context that we wanted to put.
I'm not so sure about the wall, but like Ravi just said, I think so many other impediments can come into play over here that the wall is just being used as a metaphor. He may get some part of his Mexican border built. We certainly know Mexico is not paying for it, whether now or ever. I think that's been pretty clear. So obviously the taxpayer is going to pay, and interestingly, the H-1 guys pay taxes, so that's also going to contribute to a Mexican wall if that comes into play. But it's an interesting dynamic, I think, as to whether the border will be built. I think there's no question that we certainly need to protect our borders. I don't think there's a question about that. How you do it is the question. The challenges that are involved is, of course, it is the big challenge of the day.
Yeah, I think a lot of people will watch out if he actually executes this intent of building a wall or whatever it's seen, restraining Mexicans coming in illegally. I think that will be seen as a sign of his intent to follow through on what he's committed to in the campaign. I think that's where we'd out here. And I think finances and how he funds this will be a big question to decide whether it goes ahead or not.
I agree. I mean, the other benefit that he might derive is because he's in construction himself. So his partners and his friends and his own company will actually build the wall and make billions of dollars. But, that's the truth. Hey, Rohit, what happened to Dick Cheney and Halliburton? I'm speaking facts. But no, the issue here is exactly as Rohit said, the mentality. So I think the other pressure he has, which I don't think he'll get around to building the wall, but then is, he's now being framed to be somebody who doesn't follow through to his campaign promises. And the campaign promises is building the wall, keeping illegals out, perfecting the system for just Americans has been his message. So time will tell how successful he's in doing. His interpretation is being divisive. Yes, I agree that, there are some concerns in U.S. immigration as far as illegal immigration. I mean, the biggest frustration we have, and the people we work for in this room, are legal immigrants. Can you please explain to me how an Indian national has to wait anywhere between, I'm not counting EB-1Cs or EB-1s, How can a employee who's qualified, master's, bachelor's, 10 years of experience, 15 years of experience, wait anywhere between 9 to 14 years to get a green card when there are other provisions, at least during the election time that were being promised, for illegals to get like a blue card and work authorization, then get, readjust in the system? That's not fair. So there are problems. I don't think he has the best solutions for it.
That's very true, but he does have the power to say yes or no. But fortunately, we have a Congress that does control that. So he is appealing to his base, I think, and we don't want to get into a political discussion here, but I think it's impacting all of us in this room in one way, shape, or form. Yeah.
Do you think President Trump will be able to get through any immigration bills through the Congress?
I think he will get something passed because there's sufficient impetus to kind of get something done. Not quite sure exactly where it's going to go, but I will tell you what one of my pet peeves has been ever since I've been practicing, and that has been a long time. And I think one of the first reforms that we saw was in 1986, and even at that time there was this discussion. As you probably all know, your H-1 employees, your L-1 employees, they can take their spouses and children and go immediately. And I think as we realize as practicing attorneys, if you have a green card, you cannot take your spouse immediately.
Absolutely.
You got to hang around and wait for years at a time. And that just defies logic in my mind, that how can I give a non-immigrant a greater right to bring a spouse than somebody who's a green card holder? And if you're a green card holder and you get married after you have the green card, you're either going to wait to get you have to wait to get your spouse the green card, but it's a double-edged sword. Your spouse is living outside the country, cannot usually get a B1 or a B2 to visit. If you go and spend time with your spouse in the home country or wherever the spouse is, you run the risk of losing your green card because you haven't maintained your permanent residence. And to think about it, I think it's such a ridiculous situation that for 30 plus years that I've been doing this, this has never been fixed. It was just remotely addressed in 1986 when they were discussing it, and nothing ever came out of it. So I think something will get passed in terms of the immigration bills. There will be some good, there will be some bad, there always is. But I just don't know where it's going to land.
So, I just want to add here, so while, of course, the question is whether he will be able to get it done or not, and it is, to me, it is just we have to wait and watch, and I don't think anything else can do it. But so more importantly for my colleagues in the industry here, so what we wanted to say is, please be aware of it, and please be conscious of it, and have a thorough study on it, and take advice from the attorneys, and be ready with your plan A, B, and C probably, because we don't know when it is going to come or when it can happen. So I would suggest the colleagues to have the conversation with the business as well to see, this could happen, but not yet happened. And I think what I would also suggest my colleagues here to set the expectation very clearly internally in your organization is that these have not come, has to be the clear message. That these are the proposals and it is not passed and may come, may not come is the situation. But should it happen, what should be our strategy?
How should we
I think that's where we can
structure our business
value,
model?
yeah.
Absolutely.
Just to chime in a few words on the earlier point, will some immigration legislation pass through? When when President Trump came in 9 months back, I had three things on my mind. One, the sheer unpredictability of what Trump as an individual could do. Second was the Republican majority in the Congress, both the House and the Senate, which is quite some years since they had that.
Absolutely.
And Senator Jeff Sessions as the Attorney General. And if I take a snapshot now, 9 months ahead, he continues to be as unpredictable as possible and as ever. And he's got additional distractions of Russia, North Korea on his mind.
With
so
every tweet.
immigration may not be his top priority till, and then until Twitter bans him, he's going to be active on something for sure. The second point about their inability to get the Obamacare bill repealed, to me, gives a message that they don't have the necessary concurrence or the consolidated view to take the legislation through the Congress, despite having the majority support. I think there are silos within the Republican setup. And Senator Jeff Sessions kind of being sidelined and have almost famous fallout with President Trump gives me reason to believe that the legal machinery behind the bill, which is required to kind of push through the last mile, could be a little weaker. So I think, as I said, lesser would pass through than what I thought would go through 9 months back.
I mean, the fact is, and we all know this, is whether they want to accept it or not, there is a dearth of technology expertise in that country. Nobody does. For any immigrant that's gone to America, like some of us in this room, we know there's nothing called a free lunch in America. You work really hard for everything that you earn. You're not given anything. So from that perspective, if the visas were not required, probably none of us would be in business. So there is a dearth of talent in specifically the IT industry and several others. And therefore, the talent pool of the world is heading there for a particular reason. And I'm very sure Congress, whether he admits it or not is separate, I mean, Trump admits it or not is separate, the economy needs these people. So they will have to be careful of what they do and how they limit specifically the IT industry in America.
Just to pick up from what Ravi just said, even if things don't become legislation, we have to remember that it is a signal sometimes of the administration's thought process. And you can have your internal memos and directives that can suddenly affect the law, even or affect a proposed law, even if it's not the law. Sometimes you see harder decisions being made out of the consulates. You see RFEs being issued by the USCIS given that line of thinking. Level 1 wages have been challenged for a while, probably now much more aggressively, much more specifically. I still remember our law firm is extremely compliant driven. We have had many conversations with our clients on the Simeo decision, which Anindita discussed at quite some length yesterday. And we had been forwarding or proponents of the Simeo decision for quite some time. There were many clients who decided not to follow our advice, and that's fine. And they did have occasion to say, well, we saved so much money by not doing it, which is fine. But the point is, we did think about that. We did warn our clients about that. So you can see a law, a proposed law, being effected even without it becoming law very often.
I agree. Moving on to the next question. Do you think the merit-based system is the best way to proceed to fix the U.S. immigration system? Got 84, I guess.
I think there'll be a compromise somewhere. Obviously, there are other countries that are using it, and there'll be some good balance somewhere. And maybe that's not such a bad idea. It's maybe better than the H-1B lottery that we have. And I think we've all heard and seen friends' kids who've come back because they didn't get selected in the lottery. Sometimes large companies may lead their candidates to believe that, oh, I'm ABC and therefore you're just going to get selected. And immigration attorneys do counsel their clients to say, look, that's just not true. It is a pure lottery. So it may not be a bad system, but just that on its very own and reducing other legal immigration is unlikely to be the answer.
I would go fully with the audience, 85%. Yes, I'm with you guys. In a sense that, like today, what is important and what the clients are looking at it is like, be it a technology or a software or an application, whatever it is, like what the client is looking at is, I should implement, I should go live before somebody else, before the competition does, I want to do it, right? So on the same lines, if you see from the cost aspect, right, today is my clients are really, really worried about the cost. Of course, yes, and we are in the business for making money, but what is most importantly and what the client is expecting today is, can you give me predictability? If I want ABC resource with EFG skills, can I deploy? I want this guy from India to come in to work on my project and I want him to implement this. Will he be able to do it? Will he not be able to do it? By what time he can come? Is there a guarantee that he can come? But if this system could help me to predict that exactly I want this guy and I'm going to position this guy and I can do it, I think the business will grow phenomenally well and the relationship will go very long.
You probably have a bit of a direct conflict, I think, between trying to get the best guy for the job at the lowest possible price. And I think until the American clients also recognize that and they figure a way to fix that problem and to address the fact that it's got to be a fair wage for the best services, I think merit-based system does help, but there is a bit of a contradiction over there in my mind, at least.
I mean, I guess we stand to benefit because the candidates we are sending over truly are qualified. This is not us pushing a square peg into, a round hole. There is already law, specialty occupation, be it for the H-1Bs, which require a minimum for bachelor's degree, with then additional years of experience definitely helps to build your case. L1As are truly managers, L1Bs has specialized knowledge. There is a structure already which if we are compliant with the rules, we are sending superior talent to the US in at least this discussion. So I think if it is a merit-based system that prevails, we stand to gain from it also. What happened to all the rest of us? Okay. Any suggestions on how we respond to this level RFEs, this level 1 RFEs, I guess? That's the big $1 million question. I mean, I can set it up. This has been something that is just a byproduct of the March 31st rule that was snuck in before any of us could do anything. We were, our firm, I'm sure Rohit's firm was also on a call that Ayla had discussing how everybody is just taken aback and everybody has been blindsided. For those who've been in the industry for several decades, those who've just joined the industry. So, I mean, the way we are handling it at our firm is studying the job duties, creating, a table to justify why per duty, how does it match up to the qualifications of this particular position, and then having, which you should be having internally anyway in HR, a justification of why you're paying this professional with this education and this experience X amount of money. And that should be the backbone of how you structure your H petitions anyway, and match it up to the salary levels that you choose to put on the LCA, as we discussed yesterday. So, I mean, just to go into details in the job duties, justify why you structure your internal pay scale the way you do, reflective, and back it up with the candidate's specifications, if I can say.
I just want to draw reference to James Wolfe's presentation yesterday. I think it had a very lucid way to respond to this. Draw correlation to the ONET codes, and if whatever the person is doing or the job description matches that to be that of a specialty occupation, you already have your difference. You're drawing back the reference to that. And I think there was a very clear distinction between the wages are decided by the LCA terms, and the defense of whether this qualifies for a specialty occupation can be drawn using the ONET codes. Just to err on the side of safety, I'd say go with a level 2 wage if the person has got a year or 2 years of experience. It will save you a lot of trouble and hopefully fewer RFEs. Whether we like it or not, even if you're right, just going in with a level 1 wage is probably going to get you much more questions or almost certainly an RFE. And if I had to choose between a different role category or instead of a computer programmer, if I had to choose something as a software developer, between the two, between that or choosing level 1 or level 2, I would go with level 2 on computer programmer if that makes sense, just to avoid the unnecessary question coming back because of a level 1 wage.
If I can, go ahead.
I just want to add here. See, my view is a little different in that, in the sense that is a level 1 a dead category? Is a question that we have, right? And who can say it's a dead category?
No,
we can only contemplate, and it's not proven yet. So maybe to answer to that question, any suggestion how to respond to the RFE? My suggestion would be to read the RFE, try, test it out, see how it's happening and what questions. Because today, I'm more or less, I'm convinced that today maybe the officers also not sure to what question to ask to prove whether level 1 is really a level 1 or whether level 1 is really a level 2 and is it a dead category or how to make it dead category. Today, I think probably the authorities are looking at to see how do we make it as a dead category, right? Can we push the industry by making some situations that where you automatically convert everybody into level 2. My view personally is to study the behavior of the officers and read the RFEs and respond accordingly, and we have to learn from them like what they want, because today they don't know what they want, and maybe we have to learn what they want and then see what we want. But Praveen, I would land in a situation, yes, I would by default go to a level 2 or to be safe, or maybe as you rightly said, if it is a very, very critical skill and critical client and where you cannot take a chance, and probably that's a way that today the administration is pushing us to reach that stage. Maybe if you have a choice, then we should do it that way.
So a couple of thoughts. I think first of all, we've got to remember that RFE is not in the abstract. It's affecting an individual's life. I think that's really important for you guys to understand. You guys have worked very hard to get the documents from that guy, build up that individual's hopes of going on an H-1B, and there is a lot of hope in that, no question about it. Second, I think, like Ravi was talking about studying the RFE, more often than not, we find the RFEs are templates, they're boilerplate, they're just going to be spat out at the press of a button. So that can help for a little while. I can tell you I did get 2 sample denials from our office just yesterday. One of them was for a computer programmer level 1. I think they've clearly been telling you for a while that level 1 is a tough category for you to get into. You need to be careful when you're using a level 1. And I think like Praveen said, if you have a choice of titles, maybe that's something one needs to look at.
Avoid.
Yeah, and just avoid. I mean, I'm not sure that you want to put yourself in a lion's den and then say, hey, why is the guy attacking me? If there is a way to do it. Of course, we realize, like Anindita said, it was snuck in on March 31st. I'm also hoping that most of you in this room did not just predominantly use the computer programmer category. That's been under attack for quite some time. So obviously this is going to play out over a period of time. You will have some denials. I think the important thing is to look at the future and how do you plan ahead. Like Nayak said earlier, there are people who are already planning their H1 strategies for next year. That's what you've got to look at. And in my opinion, studying the RFE is important, responding is important, but I don't think that it should ever become an ego play with the immigration or with the Labor Department to say, I want to prove myself and I want to prove that I'm right. I don't think you are there for that. I don't think the immigration attorney is there for that. I think the immigration attorney is there to get you guys the approvals and guide you as best as possible. Of course, it's always the client's final decision as long as it's reasonable, but those are my thoughts on it.
I just want to add 2 things because there have been very few, but even an RFE for level 2. So you have to be careful about that. It's just not, I mean, the focus, I would say 95 or 97% is the level 1, and specifically the current position they're going after is computer programmer, as we all discussed. But we have seen 1 or 2 RFEs for level 2. So that's interesting in itself. And when you look at the way the DOL categorizes positions, you know there are job zones for everything. The USCIS is trying to make an argument for job zone 4, which is pretty much all these professional specialty occupation positions, you should start at level 2. So there's some amount of debate and reason that needs to be corrected on their part also.
That's very true. There's no question. There's so much to look at over here when you're deciding on the job. You know, one other thing that I don't think we touched upon, and I think it's important when responding to the RFE, it complements what James said yesterday during his presentations. You may be able to argue the level 1 being professional if you have a requirement from the client which clearly identifies what they are looking for. I've used that strategy in the past quite successfully, where you're actually taking the client's requirement and saying that's what the client wants. Of course, you've got to be super careful, because if you have a client's requirement which says, I want somebody with 3 years of experience and in a particular skill, and you're sending that person on a level 1, I think you're arguing against yourself. You just walked into a trap over there.
Correct.
Because it's hard to say, oh, well, I'm going to give this guy a level 1 because this is the first time he's ever going to the US, but I'm sending somebody who got 3 years experience, and that doesn't matter. Because if you can actually support your argument with the client's requirement, you're probably in a much stronger position.
You have to go back to the job description, because that's where you can try to build your argument, and each case is different. I guess per company, there's a different roster of what the job duties are or should be. So be careful and build your legal argument based on what is a fact. And don't fudge at this point. You've already filed a petition that's on record. So given the RFE, you can't drastically change any substantial representation you've made in the support letter that's been submitted. So be careful about how you proceed. I'm sure if you have counsel, please take their help. If you don't, take the help of an experienced person internally. I think we're out of time.
Thank you very much.
Thank
you all for being here and for listening.
Thank you, Praveen. Thank you, Rohit. Thank you so much, Ravi.
Yeah.
Thank you,
I
everyone.
hope you guys enjoyed. We know we could take on a few more hours, and then, Rohit and I would be pleasantly disagreeing, but time is of the essence. Thank you very much.